God bless everybody. Today is June 28th of 2020. Today we're going to go over not necessarily a new theory that I've had for a while, but it's new to the biblical community. And that theory is that Mystery Babylon is the seat of Satan and Pergamos Turkey, as John wrote to one of the churches named Pergamos and told us where the power point of Satan is. This is like duality between Jesus and his bride, which is Jerusalem, and Satan and his bride, which is his seat, which is Pergamos, Turkey. A lot of people believe, and there's a lot of different theories out here, and we don't know who's right. I'm just throwing this down as a new theory. I believe I've talked about this for a year or two now. I think it's important. I think we can have a conversation about this. I'm trying to talk to people like Joel Richardson. I went with his theory for a long time because I didn't see another theory out here that made any sense. And at that time, up to that point, Mecca, at this point, up to this point, when I saw this additional image about Pergamos, that's where I was. A lot of people want to put it in Rome, New York City, old Iraq, Mecca. There's so many places that we want to push Mystery Babylon, and it's a everything is Israel centristic and Middle East centristic, and so it's not Rome and it's not you know New York City, and old Babylon is dead, and I believe, as I am hoping to show you in this video, that the seat of Satan, which is written to the seven churches through the letter of Pergamos, is the fifth bowl judgment in Revelation 16, and that when John has his vision, and I've talked about this a number of times, he goes into a vision, I'll show you this, in 17 about a prophecy against Mystery Babylon. He indicates this at the end of 16 too, to lead you into 17, to let you know that John's going into an additional vision, that this will radiate out three chapters. So 17, 18, and 19 are all about the um, judgment against Mystery Babylon and what is going to happen on the ground. And so, like I say, if you read those 22 chapters of Revelation properly, in the proper order, you read them 1 to 6, 8 to 10, 15, 16, and 20 to 22. Because what happens? We have three additional visions. John is taken to heaven, and three additional times while he's in heaven, God either gives him a scroll or takes him out of scene and puts him into an additional vision. One in chapter 7 about the elect, one about the nations and the people in 11 through 14, and one about Mystery Babylon between 17 and 19. And why is he doing this? Because he wants to use this as a microscope. He wants to zoom down into the layering. So if you read the 14 top chapters first, and then you add these additional subchapters of these three additional prophecies, you'll see that you're constantly seeing reoccurring events happening. And so, like I say, the top 14 main chapters are like a main program, and then it's grabbing additional information and bringing that up to the top of the story so you can start to see depth. And you can go out to that timeline that I built on my eschatology page. It's just below this on this 117 timeline. You can see all these different steps and things like that. It adds four functionally usable systems. One is a timeline, with the 14 chapters and how they're laid out so you can read this in progression and chronological order. It has how the other 8 chapters are broken out. It has a text file that goes from the beginning of John's vision all the way to the end, and then it also opens up the 22 chapters taken right out of the Bible and then overlays them over on the top of everything so you can cross check all these different things and see how this all functionally works. But today we're going to talk about Mystery Babylon and why I believe Pergamos Turkey is the seat of Satan and Mystery Babylon. You can go from my eschatology page, you can go down, you can click on this article, and I will do a recap on this at the end because I think this article is extremely important. And so we're going to start, though, today in Revelation 17 because I think we have to look at John's vision and where it starts. And I want to show you this transition before we get into this prophecy. So if you look at 17, 18, and 19, they're all about the destruction of Mystery Babylon or how Mystery Babylon rises and falls. And we're talking about these 10 region kings in Ezekiel that are going to be destroyed on that 6th seal because Erdogan of Turkey is the first seal. He's going to be the catalyst that starts Daniel 8. And then Iran and the Medes will be crushed. And then he's going to work his way through the Middle East down into Egypt. And he's going to hit that choke point. And then as Ezekiel and Daniel tell us, he's going to be dragged back to the promised land between the 2 seas. Okay? When he gets there, he's given those 10 nations that hour of power, and that's a 15-day window for them to go into Israel. And when, like I've said for a while, when they get to the Temple Mount, they'll touch that mount and God will destroy all of them, as Ezekiel 38:39 tells us. And I'm sure some of these are new concepts to people. If you've not watched any of my other videos, you're probably going, wow, where's this guy? You need to go watch the other videos because you have to understand that Gog of Ezekiel 38:39 is the white horseman or first seal, and that this is Erdogan of Turkey, and that when he broke that first seal on Yom Kippur on October 9th of this last year, he started the sorrows, and I just did videos on both of these, and so you can go out and look at these things. I'm not going to recap all this stuff. This is about Mystery Babylon. So in 17, at the very beginning, John is taken into another vision. Okay? God stops him in 16 right before this. And what does 16 all about? It's all about the bowls. Okay? So we're dropping the 7 bowls on the ground through this whole book of Revelation 16. Okay? And this is important because there's a transition occurring. Not only are we having the 5th bowl poured out on the seat of the beast. Now, of course, I've added these quotations because I want you to see, and I recommend that you do this yourselves. I used to try to work out of the Bible itself, but there's no way you can add all this commentary and notes, and you can color code things, and so I just copy King James Version or the Revised Standard Version 1952 that I use. This is King James Version. I believe you will use this book more than going back to my reverted older book. But look at this. On the 5th bowl, he's pouring this out on the seat of the beast. Okay, well, where is the seat of the beast? Well, go to Revelation 2, and it tells you that if you get to Pergamos, that letter that he's writing to Pergamos, he tells us that he knows where the seat of the beast is. Okay? So he's telling you in Revelation 2:13, right there, He knows where he dwells. He knows his seat of power. He even knows where Satan's seat is. That radiates you back to 1610. Why? Because he's throwing a judgment down on him here. This fifth bowl is for the seed of the beast. Well, where is the seed of this beast at? Oh, I'm sorry. Took you to the wrong screen there. It's in Revelation 2. He tells you where it is. It's in Pergamos. So a lot of people go, well, what was Pergamos? Well, Pergamos actually was a huge city in its day. It had colosseums. It was the second largest library with over 200,000 manuscripts and books within its libraries. It was a huge, thriving community, but there was a lot of sacrifices of Christians and things going on. Christians were being martyred in this city, and it was a terrible place. It was a horrific place. You go back and look at the history of Pergamos, and you'll see that this was not a very good place, and it was a PowerPoint for Satan, okay? And you go back and look, and nowadays, it's not even Pergamos anymore. It's Bergama. Why is that? Because when they broke these nations up after World War I, there was a dialectic issue in this region, and it ended up becoming Bergama. So maybe that's part of the mystery. It's not really named Pergamos anymore. It's a city named Bergama built over the top of a terrible place, almost like a grave, sort of. So this is why I'm going to take you to some really cool areas here to prove this case. This is not just one or two verses. This will take you into multiple chapters and books throughout the Bible so that we can show you some of these connections. So if he's talking about Pergamos, let me go to 17 here. And he's talking about dropping this bowl, let me go 16, on the seed of the beast, then we have to first discern where the seed of this beast is. And he tells us where the seed is. So I think that's extremely important so that we understand the geography of what God's trying to tell us. This is a fifth bowl judgment. Okay, so that's the other question I brought up to the community. So if the fifth bowl is dropped on the seed of the beast, and this is Pergamos, based on Revelation 2. Revelation 2 is telling us in this letter, this is where this place is at. It has no meaning whatsoever right now. It really has no geographical importance. But, like I said, as the sixth seal pops and Erdogan and Gog are destroyed with his tenfold nations, God is going to destroy other things on this planet that are going to be important to setting up his last days storyline and getting us to the end of this. And I've told you for a while that I believe the sixth seal will destroy Damascus. There won't be anything left of it. God's so tired of that war in that country that when the sixth seal pops, he's going to hit all these things and he's going to control this situation so that he dictates what's happening in the Middle East. And so that sixth seal is going to destroy the Temple Mount. It's going to clean it off. There won't be anything left. They can rebuild that third temple in 3.5 years because the whole world is going to be working on it. It could potentially destroy Pergamos because God knows that seat's there, but it may not. It just may be rebuilt as the hub of the world. And that's what we're talking about. You're talking about Mystery Babylon. We're talking about the hub of the world. Okay? Everything, all commerce, anything that comes down to exalt the beast will go through this place. And you're going to have the false prophets standing next to him or within conjunction of him because they both work in tandem. So these things are important to look at. Why is he dropping a fifth bowl, a full bowl judgment down on one place? It's got to be important. And why is he telling us that it's happening on the seed of the beast? Because He wants us to understand that this is all about Turkey. Okay, it's always been about Turkey. It's always about Satan's seat, his pinnacle of power. Even when Greece was moved, they were moved to Constantinople, Turkey. Everything came over here. And so later, as we get into chapter 17, you're going to see this breakdown of the 8 kingdoms, the seventh that was wounded and then turned into 8. I'll show you that transition there. But you've got to look at these things. Why is he saying this specific verbiage here? The seed of the beast. Because he told you in Revelation 2 back here that the seed of the beast is Pergamos. So there's a reason for this. And look at that. At the end of that letter to Pergamos, there is a specific judgment to the point where he's talking about the two-sworded tongue that's coming out of his mouth. And where do we hear about that? Later in Revelation, like 18, you hear about that judgment against all the nations in Armageddon. In 16, that's all about the sixth bowl. You're talking about Armageddon there. That sword. And I wrote down the verse there, 19:5. You can go look at that. It's the same verbiage. Okay, the sword of the mouth. You're talking about a judgment against this city here. Why is he judging Pergamos so strongly? Because he knows that's going to be his pinnacle of power. This will be the whore of the world. He's going to whore his bride out to everybody. They're going to dirty her and pollute her, and it's just going to be a terrible cesspool by the time she's done. She's going to be the Jezebel that destroys the world. She's going to be polluted beyond belief. And when that bowl judgment comes down, the nations will come against her. And so even her husband, her bride, this is Satan's bride. Antichrist is going to come down on her because at the end he's failing. He's going to be thrown in the lake of fire. He's going to fail and he's going to lash out like a child. Like I say, after abomination, and he sees those two witnesses rise because they've been prophesying for 1260 days on the mount. They rise. Even Antichrist knows, Satan knows the Bible as well as we do. He knows that that is a major pinnacle point, and this is a indication from God that his time is really short. And we talk about that 1335 shortened half, that second half. It's only 75 days because his elect won't be left. So let's get into this a little more. I wanted to show you this connection between 16, 17, 19, and all these places. Before we even get into this story, we're already into 3 or 4 different books or different chapters of Revelation that indicate about this seat and the judgments that are going to happen to this place. So if we go back into 17 and we realize that John is taken out of a vision. He's given an additional vision. And it alludes to the 16. This is another thing I ought to show you. So at 16 at the end, you have this 5th bowl judgment on the seat of the beast. And like I say, 16 is all about the bowls. It talks about all 7 bowls. It goes through what's going to happen. And then what do we have on the 6th bowl? We have Armageddon. Okay, this is when they bring all these people together. You can go to Joel 3 and see all about Armageddon. It talks all about these different things, and I wrote these things down so you can go back and look at these passages. You need to be able to follow this stuff. And this great earthquake is not the same as the 6th seal, because you're in the sorrows in the 6th seal. And remember, 6 seal, you have 7 seals, and when the 7 seals broken, we hand out the 7 trumpets, and then the 7th trumpet sound, and after the 7th trumpet sounds, you have the 7 bowls of God's wrath, and God's wrath is the 7 bowls. Okay, but this earthquake is not the same as Revelation 6th seal. This is in the sorrows. This is not. This is in great tribulation. We are in. We're almost to the end of the story, and Antichrist is being basically destroyed in the next seal, or the next bowl here. So You have the destruction of Mystery Babylon or Pergamos Turkey on the 5th. And then what do we get into? We get into the battle of Armageddon of that 6th bowl. Okay? When the 7th one is poured out, he cleanses the planet and then he propagates his bride back on the planet. He brings Jerusalem and heaven together and then reformates the planet. And then we start the millennial. And like I say, we're not here for any of the wrath. We leave on the 7th trumpet. And so once that 7th trumpet sounds, he hands those 7 bowls of wrath out, and that drops down on the wicked. Whether they can repent after that point and God will be merciful and allow them to gain access, they will, that's something that he'll have to discern. But the original rapture of the saints, martyrs, and the elect and the priests will be gone by then, before these events start to happen in 16 here. So we're into Armageddon here. We just had the destruction of the whore of the world, Mystery Babylon. The seat of Pergamos is destroyed at this time. And then, look, he starts to talk about this prophecy at the end of 16. He wants you to understand he's going to take you into a cutscene right here. Okay? And like I've said, if you look at how these books are laid out, it goes from 16, the end of Armageddon. He's got the 6th and 7th bowl are poured out. The 3 frogs come across the Euphrates and this one here on the 6th bowl. And then you have to go to 20 to see the rest of the story, because what happens? He throws the lake of fire down on the Antichrist and the false prophet, and he binds Satan for 1,000 years. So what's the middle of that transition between 17, 18, and 19? He goes into that at the end of 16 and then radiates it at the very beginning of 17 when he tells you he's going to take John into an additional vision. Okay, so at the end of here, he warns you right off the bat. We're going to talk about Mystery Babylon now. Why? Because in the 17, when he goes into this original part of this chapter, he takes John, come hither, I will show you the judgment of the great whore. He's not in the same scene anymore. He's taken him into another vision. Come hither. He's going to show him depth now of what's going to happen to Mystery Babylon that he just talked about in 16. But this is going to radiate out 3 full chapters, and then he's going to complete 16 in the start of 20. Okay? And that's what I say. You've got to look at these transitions. It is chronological from 1 to 22, but you got to break these 8 chapters out and realize that if you read the top 14 chapters, it makes a complete story, and then you can add all this depth with all these additional subchapters. So in 17, we start this additional vision. John's in heaven, and he's having another vision while he's in heaven. Okay, this has got to be a pretty interesting thing for John to be going through. He's wrote 7 letters, and then he's whisked to heaven, and then while he's standing in heaven having visions or seeing things, God gives him additional visions, so he's having visions in visions of somehow. It's an interesting world up there. I'm just saying, he's having additional vision here. This is a cut scene out of the original main 14 chapters. And so he starts talking about these 7 heads and these 10 horns. And we've talked about this many times. I want to show you this breakdown and how this works today. Okay? So when we get into Nebuchadnezzar's dream, you get into the gold head and the silver shoulders and the bronze waist and the iron legs and the feet and clay, and then the rock comes down and smashes the feet and clay, and the whole thing falls down, turns into a mountain, and all that. Okay. But there's a misconception on what this 7th kingdom is here and how it converts to the 8th. And I've been saying for a while, if you look at how this is divided, the first kingdom is Egypt, the second kingdom is Assyria, The third kingdom is Babylon or Iraq today. And look at that. You can go from the past kingdoms to the future kingdoms. Old Babylon, today Iraq. What was that? Saddam Hussein. He fell. Old Kingdom, Fourth Kingdom, Silver Shoulders, Medo-Persia, Iran, Shia. Guess what? Iran's the next king to compel into the Middle East. He's been running proxy wars for 20 years. No one stopped him. No one's tried to stop him. But look at the Fifth Kingdom. You got the Bronze Waste, the Grecian Empire. What did I just tell you? They moved the Grecian Empire to Constantinople, Turkey. Guess what's coming up next? Daniel 8. They're going to have, that's that leopard. You got the lion, the bear, the leopard. Okay? And this here, this Medo-Persia thing, you got the bear with the one side higher than the other. He's talking about Daniel 8 and the destruction of the Kurds in Iran today. This is old, but it's going to happen again. This is what he's talking about. Okay? But then you get into this fifth kingdom. This is where we are now in modern day. Erdogan of Turkey is going to be the next king, but he's going to die on that sixth seal when he gets to Israel. And then we start into this transformation here of this Islamic madness. Okay? This is an Islamic radical agenda, and there are good Muslims on this planet, and they're not, when we try to lump and stereotype everybody into the same thing, that's not the way this works. Everybody has good players, bad players. But these are radical Muslims, and these are going to be the people that are going to cause our problem in the near future as we start to see, even in our own country, the takeover of these police departments and potentially Sharia law being placed into our cities as a way to, control the crime and things like that. They're removing the power of the police so they can self-regulate themselves. And in a lot of these communities, they're Muslim heavy. And so it's going to be a Sharia type system. And I don't think we want that in our country, but the 4th of July is a PowerPoint, as we've talked about. And I believe not only the corona is going to break out, but you have another problem with the potential bringing on of Sharia law in this country, and the Democrats are pushing this agenda pretty heavily right now, so we'll see how that turns out. But as the seventh kingdom forms, as we see this new Ottoman Empire rise before 2023 that I talked about, we are going to see Erdogan die on that sixth seal when he gets to Israel with his 10 nations, as Ezekiel 38 and 39 talk about. And when that happens, he's going to bury him. This is the wound that's on the seventh head that appears dead, but then comes back to life as an eighth head. Okay? This is the wound that he's going to be resurrected out of this grave of Hamon-Gog, as Isaiah 14 tells us. I'll go into some of this as we get into this. I know I'm getting a little away from Mastery Babylon, but this is all about Revelation 17 and how these kingdoms are going to come up. Okay? These 10 nations up here from Gog, Ezekiel 38-39, will be destroyed, and they will form into 4 regions from this destruction. Now the empire's dead. The new Ottoman Empire is gone now. And you're going to make a way for the new beast system that's going to come out of these 4 regions with this new Antichrist that resurrects out of Isaiah 14 here. He's going to come out, and he's going to be a resurrected supernatural nightmare called Little Horn Antichrist. Okay, so we're going to see these beast kingdoms rise, and then look at that. We're talking about the selection of the 144,000 that are going to go against this nightmare, because you're talking about the seventh seal here. And all these people that have died here, you're talking about the fifth seal martyrs right in here, okay, as he's starting to move through the region. So we get into the 17 Revelation. We start talking about this beast, the beast kingdom, how Antichrist is going to rise, how Gog is going to fall. All these things are happening, and it all reiterates around Turkey. Okay, and that's why it's important that we understand that all these catalyst things that are happening to us that are going to affect us in the Middle East and radiate throughout the world are going to be unleashed as our Lord's standing there breaking those seals. He's unleashed Gog. He's unleashed that first seal, which is now unleashing the other four seals upon us, and that's what's coming out down upon us now is the global meltdowns, the coronavirus, all these terrible rioting and different things going on. So as we get into here, you can start to see this transformation of this sixth trumpet beast. And like I say, he's going to ascend out of this bottomless pit. Well, you go through Isaiah 14 3 times. I've done a video about this. I'm not going to go deep into Isaiah 14. You go watch that video. For 3 different times, he talks about Satan being brought down to the grave, but he doesn't touch the grave. And what about these worms that are spread over them, over him, above and below? That's Gog. We're talking about this prominent horn. At this very moment, not this moment in time, but at this moment in the Bible where I'm pointing at here, Gog is being resurrected into an Antichrist being. Okay? You're talking about this rising of the beasts of the sea in Revelation 13. And he's going to be compelled. And like I say, if you go out on them timelines, I show you where that transformation occurs of that rising of the sixth trumpet. But let's get back into what we originally were talking about, and that is Mystery Babylon. Okay, so we're talking about this whore that's going to be brought up. The world's going to, fall. Everything's going to be funneled through her, and they're going to exalt the beast on God's seat. And we know an abomination, he's going to defile that. So we see this building of this kingdom that's coming up and how it's compelling towards a city being built, okay? And that this will, he's talking about right here, and this is what I'm saying up of here. I probably should have maybe moved this down a little bit, but he's talking about that fifth king, the seven heads, the 7 mountains, and then how 5 have fallen, and yet one is to come, but one is to come for a short time. Well, you're talking about Antichrist coming out of Gog here, okay? And then he talks about the 6th trumpet. Well, all these passages here are talking about 6th trumpet event. Okay, and there's many more, I'm sure. I'm trying to add them as I find all these things, and I'm trying to go through each book individually and then add them as I find all these things out, and then I bring this to your attention so you can go look at these things. Do not take my word for these things. Please go out and look at all these passages and see how all these different correlations occur and how this thing's happen. So up here he's talking about this bringing up of the Mystery Babylon, the rising of the beast through these 10 kingdoms, and how they're going to form into the 4 regions, and then Antichrist is going to come out, the selection of the 144,000, then we start to see that 6th trumpet hit. And that's what I mean. This is a 7th seal thing here, okay? And this is a seals war back here where Erdogan is, and he's being destroyed as the 7th kingdom into the 8th before we get to Antichrist. This is a seals thing back here. So when you finally get to Antichrist, we're talking about then he's come for a short period, and that's that 1260-day gap between the signing of that treaty to abomination that we've talked about on the charts. And that's why I say you got to use these. Why? The short space, because it's 42 months, it's 3.5 years. It's to the time of the signing of the treaty, just after they stopped those continual burnt sacrifices 30 days prior. To abomination is 1260 days, but you got to add that 30-day prior to that, which is the 1290 days that Daniel is talking about. He stops those continual burnt sacrifices first. He signs that treaty, and then we have abomination 1260 days later. But this goes through all these different verses that link you to the sixth trumpet and how this rising of this Antichrist occurs through this Islamic nightmare that of 10 nations that attack Israel and then die and then compel, as Isaiah 14 tells us, they bring this Gog directly out of the grave. And it tells us, as Michael's pulling him out of heaven, was he standing on the pit on the fifth trumpet, and he's bringing the Satan out of heaven forever. He loses his seat at that time. Okay, and he throws him on the planet, but he doesn't touch the grave. Okay, because it's not Satan on the ground here, it's Antichrist with another man next to him that's impregnated with special powers called the false prophet that can bring, that can bring fire down from heaven. Okay, and why is he making this whore desolate? You know, he's going to burn her with fire, and we're talking Isaiah 21. A lot of people want to throw Isaiah 21 into a place that it shouldn't. This is a six bowl event. So if you go to Isaiah 21, you'll realize that Isaiah 21, this burden of the wilderness, is talking about a judgment against Mystery Babylon. This is a six bowl judgment a fifth bowl judgment right before Armageddon against Mystery Babylon. Okay, and why they're raping this, taking all the spoils, and look at that. Iran's going to play a big one. Iran's going to get hit by Turkey before long, and they're going to be destroyed with the Medes. But Iran is going to play a huge pivotal thing at the very end, because Iran and no media. That might actually be the Kurds. I might have made a mistake there. I got to go back and look at that. Anyway, Iran is going to play a big point in the fifth bowl judgment, because they're going to be the ones that attack Mystery Babylon at the end, and they're going to get a little bit of revenge from that Gog attack of Daniel 8 prior to them getting to Israel with those 10 nations. And that's what I mean. A lot of things people don't seem to understand out here. Turkey's going to do a lot of things, but a lot of judgments are going to come back against Turkey. And just as Egypt, you at that choke point when they get down into, they move down through the Middle East after Daniel 8, they're going to hit that choke point, and then God brings them back. Well, they're going to have battles between Egypt, and Egypt's not going to ever get along with this Antichrist being, and it tells us that there's multiple potential wars to where even the daughter of Egypt is taken into captivity and bondage, and that because of the different incursions that are happening between Antichrist and Egypt, because not everybody's going to fall for this. You know, not everybody's, oh, the whole world's going to kneel down. Not everybody will. No. And Antichrist is going to have methods to control the insurrections that do come up against him. And look at that. You know, in Isaiah 21, we're talking again about Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Well, when does Babylon fall? Okay. Well, it falls on the fifth bowl. Okay, right here. Seed of Satan is poured out on the fifth bowl. So this Isaiah 21 is talking about the fifth bowl. Okay, it is not it's not an abomination or before. This is at the very end. You've already had 7 seals. 7 trumpets, and you've now worked into the 5th bowl. We're almost to the end where the 6th bowl is where Antichrist and the false prophet are thrown in the lake of fire, and you have Armageddon, and then we have the 7th bowl cleansing, and actually that's not true. I shouldn't say it like that, because you see the kings come over on the 6th seal, and then in 20 they're actually thrown in the lake of fire, because that's right after that, and then Satan is bound for 1,000 years. But this is right. This is the 5th bowl here, and then you have the 6th bowl, and the cleansing of the planet. And look at this. A lot of these things we talk about, you look into all these different things you can bring up, and look, even DDAM, and this is another thing that I keep talking about. You've got to bring Gog into this equation here. We're talking about these burdens, and there's a burden against DDAM, because why? He's mentioned it in Ezekiel 38:13 also, okay? So if you go into Ezekiel 38:13, you can see he's talking about Sheba and Dedan, okay? You've got to link these things, okay? So now what are we into? We're in Ezekiel 38:39. And like I told people before, if you go down in here, you're talking about latter days. Ezekiel 38:39, that's where it leads us back to Gog. I know I'm getting off Mystery Babylon, but it all matters here. Excuse me. You get 38:39, we talking about Ezekiel. You got Joel 2, the Gog thing. Ezekiel 37, the dry bones have come back. Then Gog's going to take away the fortunes. You get into latter days. And then you look at that. He talks about the old servants, the old prophets. Back in the day, you get back into Matthew 24:3 and Mark 13:3, and you're talking about the sorrows. It tells you right in those, right there in 13:8, I believe, it talks about the sorrows. So yeah, right there, 24:8 and 13:8. Okay, we are still in the seals here. We have not signed a treaty at this point, people. Not here. But this is the start of Gog, and Gog will make it to Israel, and he will break that 6th seal, and then as he's compelled into an Antichrist being, then we will see his whore rise, and that's going to be that horror hub of the world. So let's get back into 17. We've brought in a lot of connections. I hope I'm not confusing anyone here. This is pretty important, and I'm hoping God is leading me to showing you these connections, okay? It's important when he lines these things up in this manner. He starts talking about these nations and how they're going to transform from 10 into 4, and you're talking about Daniel 8 here, and all this stuff links together. And then we're talking about the 6th trumpet, and how he's going to be here for 1260 days, and the 6th trumpet happens. Okay, so the 6th trumpet happens here. You got to look at that 7 seals. Then once that 7 seals broken, we hand in the trumpet. So the seals are up here. Okay, but he starts talking about this judgment, but then he's going to go through this transformation of the beast to the time of the destruction of him, Antichrist, and his whore, all in this one chapter. So you have to look at these things. Now, if you get into 18, because this is still part of this is a 3-chapter prophecy, we start to get into how, right at the beginning, he's talking about the 5th bowl again. Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. Wow, Isaiah 21:9. I mean, it's almost exact verbiage. You get into Revelation 14:8, it's the same type of a thing. Okay, look at Revelation. Babylon is fallen. Okay, he's talking about all these things here for a reason, all these connections for a reason. Okay, but you get in here and you start to realize that he's going to talk about this destruction of this whore, and how you want to stay away from this place if you're a Christian, but and you don't want to go exalt the beast. You don't even want to go look at the beast. I mean, why would you care? You know, we the if we even look upon this madness, then we're not in the right place, I guess. I always said you sort of want to run the wrong other way, but we're going to have 144,000 soldiers directly confronting him head to head, so I guess we can't run the other way. We're going to have to deal with this. So as we get into 18, you start to see all these judgments against this whore, this seed of Satan, and we get even go into some of the plagues, and Isaiah 63:4 talks about that one day of the plagues, and talk about the destruction of the mighty city and how it's going to be destroyed in 1 hour. Well, if you go to my timeline at the end, especially that last video I just did about the astrological conjunctions, you can see at the end of there that those 15 days are the 7 bowls of wrath, and that falls between the feast of, the Feast of Trumpets and the Feast of Tabernacles, between October 2nd and October 17th of 2027. So you can go out and look at that. But he's dropping this bull down in an hour. So in 15 days, the basically this city gets cleansed. And what does it tell us? After that city gets cleansed, no one can inhabit it. It's uninhabitable. No one would want to inhabit it. It's been so devastated by God's wrath that no one would want to go there. Why would you? There's nothing left. They've raped the whole city. They've taken all the fortunes away. And if you go into Isaiah 21, it talks about how they're bringing the fortunes out of the horror as the smoke's coming, filling the sky, and they're driving their chariots and horses and buggies away from it as they've raped the city and taken everything from her. So, and then as you get into, and it gets, this is a crazy book. Are you talking about Michael? He's standing on the pit. Michael's a big player in the Bible. Gabriel's a big angel. Michael's a pretty strong guy. And Michael controls the release of Satan. He controls the destruction of Babylon. He does a lot of things. And look at this. I keep talking about this verbiage is important. Anytime you see these types of verses, the way he structured them and the way he says stuff is important. So, he's talking about the bridegroom and the bride. Okay, and I keep talking about this duality. Jesus and God him specifically, has a bride named Jerusalem. It's a city. It's a special place, the land of Israel. In this place, he has a specific pinnacle of power. The same thing radiates out from Turkey with Satan and Antichrist. Satan has a special pinnacle of power called Pergamos. It's his bride. It's his land. Turkey's his region. And so this is what he's trying to tell you. When he unleashes this brides or bridegroom, or he destroys the brides or bridegroom, he's more than likely talking about Antichrist and Mystery Babylon, or Pergamos Turkey, and how all these nations are going to be deceived and they're going to come out and destroy her. Why? Because, and I talked about this earlier, look at that. Because in her was found the blood of the prophets, the saints, and the people that were slain on the earth. And you go back in history and you look at Pergamos, they had arenas, they had beheadings, crucifixions, all kinds of stuff. This was a major hub throughout this region, and it will be again. Okay? And, a lot of people say, well, it's not in a place where it's next to the sea. Yes, it is. It's like 26 kilometers from the Argentine Sea, so it's not. It's actually closer maybe than even Mecca to the sea. And if you look at the topography of that area and all those islands, It's talking about all the islands being thrown at that time. Okay, so there's a reason for these things. He's wanted geographically looking at these areas. We need to understand what's going on in these regions. And so if you look at Pergamos and how close it is to the ocean and how the topography wraps around it and all these islands and how it's going to affect these islands in Isaiah 21, it talks about this. Okay, all these different areas are being affected. Okay, and how all these burdens are being thrown down. I'm not going to go into all this stuff. You need to read this stuff and come out and look at it. So we get into end 18. It's all about the falling of Mystery Babylon. We're in the second chapter of the 3-chapter prophecy of John's removal into another vision at the beginning of 17, the end of 16. And so he goes through all this. He's talking about, how they're just taking everything. They're raping this. The whore that raped this world is now being raped itself. They're taking everything. They're stripping her clean. And because of this, Antichrist isn't even going to be happy, and he's going to go against her too. But at this time, Michael is throwing a millstone in the ocean, and this is going to split this city and destroy this whole thing, and it will be inhabitable. And he's talking about that bride and bridegroom. Okay, we're talking about the 6th and the 5th bowl judgments, the bride and the bridegroom. And he's talking about that city where the prophets were found dead and how they have been for centuries persecuted in that country. Okay, but you go to 19, and we start in that 3rd chapter of judgment against Mystery Babylon. Excuse me. He's talking about the great whore again. 16 goes to 20. So we're still in the middle of, we're at the end of the 3rd chapter prophecy against Babylon at this time. He's judging the great whore. And look at that. We're going back to Revelation 4:4 again. You can't write this stuff, man. I'm telling you. Talking about the 24 elders and how they fall down. You go to Revelation 4, which is part of this right before Daniel gets into all this stuff. We're talking about Daniel 7 here. And he's talking about, let me go back to that real quick so I can make sure I hit the right verse. Revelation 4:4. Okay, so if you go to Revelation 4:4, you're talking about those 24 elders seated. Okay, and this is not the church is being raptured here. Okay, everybody in the pre-rapture thing that says when John's taken up and the open doors, this is that chapter right here. Might as well address this while we're here. Okay, so John is taken up and only John is taken up. And then he sees these 24 elders sitting here, which are not the churches that are being raptured at this time because we're going to be here to the 7th trumpet. What this is alluding to is 19, okay? So 19 is telling us in 19:4, you're going to be here because this is talking about these 24 elders and how they're throwing their crowns down and worshiping God on his throne here. You've got to make these connections. Why does he tell you 24 elders here when he brings you back to Revelation 4 and talks about the 24 elders seated there again? Okay? And he's talking about these people, in gold and stuff and the thunderings and all this stuff. You can go to Daniel 7:9 and see that same similar verbiage, okay? So we're talking about these 24 elders. We've had this destruction against the great whore. Now the 24 elders are praising God because they're throwing their crowns down. He's the king. He hands out the crowns. He can take those crowns away anytime. So they're just titles anyway, and titles mean nothing. So we talk about the great multitude of the voices. Well, Revelation 14:2. What's that all about? Okay, the rapture. Talking about the 144,000 on the 7th seal that have now gone against Satan and Antichrist. They've all been, they've been taken away at this point. They're with the Lord here. Okay? Why does he put this on the end of this prophecy? Because he wants you to understand that these people are special. They're going to go through this massive judgment, and it tells you all about this in Revelation 7. Revelation 7 is a prophecy against the elect, or about the elect, and it tells you about how they're selected, how they're going to go against Antichrist, more than likely perish as their judgments are being placed down against them, against Antichrist is going to come down upon them, and through their testimony they're going to die for the word of God. And so you need to sort of see how all this is laid out. And then look at that. Right after that, and the elect arose out of chapter 7 that talks about that, them being destroyed over time throughout the 1260 days, and then you have the two witnesses perish as abomination happens in that shortened period because there won't be any of these guys left. That's that 75-day gap between the Feast of Trumpets and our Lord comes back on the seventh trumpet and the Feast of Tabernacles. We have that 15-day window of wrath. And what happens right before that? Our Lord comes out on the seventh trumpet. Behold the white horse. This is not seal 1, guys. We're into Revelation 19. The seals are a long way down the road, man. They were a long, long time ago at this point. So you cannot take this white horse of Revelation 19:11 and make it a white horse first seal event. I'm sorry, you're in the trumpets here, man, in the bowls. That's so far in the past at this point. You've got to look at the procession of these things. So as our Lord comes down at the end of 19, okay, the Lord comes down and we see the battle of Armageddon. Wow, right after the seventh trumpet, he starts blowing the bowls of wrath down, and then what? A battle of Armageddon on the sixth bowl. Okay? And what? The beast is taken with the false prophet, and they're thrown in the lake of fire. Wow, where did that happen? We saw that before somewhere. Yes, you did. Revelation 20. Because he's linking you back to the storyline again from 16 to 20, where 6 bowl and 7 bowl has been poured down in 16. The 3 frogs have come out, and then he transitions into 20, and guess what happens? Satan is bound for 1,000 years, and we have the false prophets and the Antichrist thrown in the lake of fire, and then we end the story with the beautiful marriage of our Lord's kingdom on this earth, and then the millennial kingdom starting up with the resurrection of these 144,000 and the people that died as martyrs, potentially, maybe even the 5th seal martyrs, because they're part of the story. So when you get to the end of Revelation 19, you realize that the Lord's come back, that these two terrible beings that have been on our planet for 3.5+ years are now being destroyed in the lake of fire, and that we've had this massive battle on this planet. But prior to this, on the seventh trumpet, as he's throwing judgments against the wicked, we are taken away with our Lord into the heavens, and he comes back dipped in blood with the sword of his mouth. Talking about the sword of the mouth again. You get into this Revelation 2, the sword of the mouth. We get into, there you go, 19:15. We go right back into 19 again. 19:15. We're talking about the sword of his mouth, that sharp sword that cuts both ways. And this is going to be a last chance decision when he gets on the ground. This can go either way. You can listen to the word and the truth, and you can repent and convert yourself back to the right side, or he'll cut you down like wheat and make you chaff and throw you away and put you in the lake of fire. So it's your choice. He may give you a chance here, But we're going to be gone. If you're any Christian at all and have any clue, and you're in the book of life, you're hopefully going to be taken up here. You know, but that book of life judgment doesn't happen until we get into 20 and beyond. And but I wanted to show you all these different things that even Daniel 2, alludes to some of these different things. We talk about, the head of gold and all these different things. That brings us back to 17, where he talks about the kingdoms. And this is important. This fourth, fifth, sixth kingdom, as we move into the seventh kingdom where Erdogan dies as Gog, and then we transform into this eighth little horn kingdom. These are older kingdoms, but they're now starting to come back. Because this kingdom was Saddam Hussein's kingdom. This is the Iranian kingdom of today. And this is Turkey, okay? And this is where you need to watch right now. Because Turkey's this fifth kingdom that's going to bring back the Islamic nightmare, die, and be crushed on the sixth seal with his Ottoman Empire and be destroyed for good. That Ottoman Empire will not exist. This beast system that comes out of this Ottoman Empire will, and the little horn will be developed from this nightmare. As this 10 nations crumble from this destruction, they will be in confusion, and this will form this four regions. And from that, once he comes out of the grave, as Isaiah 14 tells us, then he'll come back as a supernatural nightmare. And these three nations, these three regions are not going to fight him. They're going to go with him because they know that they think he's freaking Allah. So, whatever, man. This is all bad at this point, and we have to get through this. We're going to be here until the seventh trumpet. We got to let people know that this is coming. But when you look at this and how this is laid out, and even Joel 3, and this, I wanted to bring this up because this is important. You get into Joel 3, this is an Armageddon type prophecy, okay? And in Joel 3:4, we're talking about the it's like a slave trafficking thing through Palestine into the Grecian areas. And I want you to see this, and that's what I mean by they're going to be moving people through Pergamos. Okay, they're moving them through from Israel, which is the remnant, these captured Jews from the Ezekiel 38-39 war. You have the Joel 1 plague, which a third of them die. You have the Gog plague, where they die by the sword. A third of them perish, and then you have the third that are taken to hidden place. Well, some of these people are captured, taken into captivity, and they're sold through this slave trade. As Joel 3 tells us here, you're talking about the Valley of Jehoshaphat. You're talking about Armageddon here. You're talking about all these people that are being sold up through Palestine into the Grecian areas. Well, they're running them through Pergamos, not Mecca, and not through southern Iraq. And they're definitely not running them through Rome or New York City. Okay? Joel 3 is alluding to a slave trafficking thing that takes us back to where the seed is. Why? Because it's the hub of the world. Everything will go through here, and this whore will transform the world, and they'll sell these slaves, and it'll be an ugly thing that's going on here. But Joel 3 alludes to this trafficking of these people, Christians and Jews. And, at the end, we have another major earthquake event right before God cleanses the planet. But this is not a sixth seal judgment. This is a sixth bowl. We're way, way past the sixth seal at this point. So I wanted to go over some of these points. So what I'm going to do is I build a synopsis. Excuse me. on my end of days survival page. It goes over Mystery Babylon and a lot of these key points. And I built this, and I'm not trying to target anyone here. If for some reason I bring somebody's name up, I do nothing of any consequence against that person. I just want to try to have them review their stance so that they can maybe look at it a different way. And this is a new theory. No one's, as far as I can tell, no one's ever come up with this theory or discussed it in any way. And I've Googled and I've been on these sites a lot. And so, people talk about Mystery Babylon. They actually talk about Pergamos and then they end up Mecca somehow. I don't know how that really happens. So I actually rebutted Joel Richardson on this because he wrote a book about Mecca. He is one of the leading scholars in this area. And I've been trying to get him back to the futuristic point of view of Daniel 11 being a Gog event that transformed into an Antichrist event around verse 20, 21. Okay, you'll see this transformation occur in Daniel 11. But Mystery Babylon, and I believe I've made a fairly strong case for it being Pergamos Turkey, a special judgment on the fifth bowl against the seed of Satan, which is the same place that he wrote the letter to, that this is where this seat of Satan and this mystery Babylon whore is located, is Pergamos Turkey. Now, one of the main premises, and I don't want to beat Joel up, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get you to understand why my stance is different. And hopefully he'll look at this and maybe we can change the conversation a little bit about this. And like I say, I'm not here to gain recognition. I don't want to be out in the public. So it's not about that or money. I don't sell anything on my sites or anything like that. It's just about the information. But I do believe he's wrong in this, and I want to rebuttal him on this. So he indicates as a wilderness, as a desert. Okay, but that's not what the Hebrew calendar tells or the Hebrew dictionary tells us. It's denoted as a barren desert, but with a district or regional that is suitable for sheep or cattle and is uncultivatable, but it has enough vegetation on it and rain that it can sustain livestock. Okay, so it's not a desert, number one. And if you look at Isaiah 21, which he alludes to, which I brought you to down here, okay, we're talking about Mystery Babylon here and how these chariots of men are coming out of this city and they've raped the city of all the riches and how Mystery Babylon has fallen. This is a six-bowl judgment here. It's not anything other than that. And so when you come back here, you realize that this starts to link us up with this Ezekiel 38, 9:30 prophecy, okay? And we're talking about those old seven kingdoms, and it's not these places. It's not any of these places here. You can look at if they start talking about New York City and stuff as Mystery Babylon, they really are reaching to find conclusions and connections to these things. And you need to question these people. As I wish you would question me on these things because it is not here. I'm not throwing this down so that you don't look this stuff up. I am trying to disprove this stuff as much as I'm trying to prove it, okay? So I'm throwing this stuff down because I made these connections. Is it right? I'm trying to figure it out, but it seemed right, and the image told me it was. This was the fourth image that I had. I talked about that image. You can go back and look at those videos on some of that. I'm not going to get into that here. So we talk about the horror of Satan's bride and how this is affecting us on the fifth bowl in Revelation 16:10, how Isaiah 21 is talking about the seed of Satan having a fifth bowl uh, judgment placed upon it right before right before that you have the seventh trumpet and the rapture of the elect Not necessarily the body of Christ. I probably should change that. This is actually a after the throne comes down and the book of life is open, and in Revelation 20, all the rest are judged in the sea, in the hell, and in above the earth. So this 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 is not the same. And then he talks about John writing that letter to the seed of Satan in Revelation 2:12. He talks about that special judgment of Revelation 16 of the fifth bowl, and how I've talked about this being the seed of Satan, and how he wrote that letter to that church, and how all nations will lash out against this whore at the end, okay, as they're raping her of her. She's raped the whole world, and so now the world's going to rape her. Even her own husband is going to take advantage of this bride, his bride. And how Pergamos is only 26 kilometers from the Argentine Sea, and how Michael is going to throw this boulder into the sea, and it's going to radiate and destroy this place. And look, Mecca's 80 kilometers from the Red Sea. It's 3 to 4 times the distance from this place. And I even showed you the closest port to the Red Sea that it might even be close to. I just don't see Mecca. And think about this. When the sixth seal pops and Mecca's destroyed, because God doesn't, and God's not going to allow you to walk around a black rock. They're going to force you to either exalt Antichrist or you're going to be on his side. There's not going to be any middle ground, and Antichrist isn't going to let you exalt anybody but him. So you're not going to be running around a black rock. It won't be there anymore. Sixth seal is going to probably clean that area off. And there's special judgments against Saudi Arabia anyway. So I've told you for a while, Pergamos will be the hope of the world. It will whore out to the nations, but the nations will take care of her, and then the world will be cleansed on that sixth or on that seventh bowl. Revelation 18:23 talks about that bride and bridegroom, and there's actually a couple other places that I haven't brought up about this. This is a work in progress, and as I find more and more connections, I will bring these connections to you. I'm constantly finding more and more things, so I'll add them to the timelines and stuff as I get them, but this is where I'm at with this now. Pergamos was freed by Alexander the Great around 362 BC, and we talked about Pergamos' history, so you need to look at all these things. Pergamos was under the control of the Romans for a long time, and many prophets and saints died in this place. Everybody's like, well, the prophets and saints only died in Jerusalem. Really? Where did you ever come up with that one? Okay, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about this whore and how he's already propagated death upon our people, and done terrible things in the days of the Colosseums, and how these people were crucified and destroyed, and how the cities and those regions came to watch these events, and the only the only destruction of Jews and Christians were in Jerusalem is ridiculous. So, excuse me, I don't agree with that at all. Um, he talks about this first mentioning of Mystery Babylon in 1610 with the fifth bowl. And then he starts right up at that vision of 17 when John's taken, come hither, taken away into an additional vision. 14:8 talks about how all the nations are going to drink of this whore, of this terrible place, and how you want to stay away from it. Talks about Pergamos and how when he gets to that Temple Mount and that sixth seal breaks and you have that destruction of Gog before abomination, there's that 3.5 year mark. And then you have abomination, then you have great tribulation right after that. And listen, there's 3 demarcations we need to understand. The sorrows start from the starting of the breaking of the first seal, when the Lord is holding that scroll and breaking that first seal, to the signing of that 7-year covenant. That is the sorrows and birth pains. Tribulation falls between the signing of the treaty of the 7-year covenant of death, just after he stopped those continual burnt offerings, to abomination. And then you start that great tribulation period to the end, where he pours the wrath down. And then once wrath down, he creates a new marriage. So great tribulation ends with the throwing of Antichrist and the false prophet in the lake of fire, and Satan being bound before the millennial. 16:10 talks about that angel coming down with the vial against the seat of the beast. Okay, I've asked this question so many times, I'm getting tired of asking it. Why would he throw a full-blown judgment of a bull down on a place that doesn't matter? The seed of the beast is Pergamos Turkey. He tells us that in this letter. So why is he pouring this bull down on a place that doesn't matter? Because it's going to be rebuilt in those 3.5 years. After that sixth seal pops up here, Pergamos and the temple and all this will be cleansed and then be rebuilt as Antichrist comes out, and the whole world will be working on this. Well, it can't be done in 3.5 years. You know what? They got it to where they can rebuild the temple in what, a year? So it can be done. And as this commerce is being promoted through this horror, it's going to spring up quickly as they're going to see this nightmare, this this supernatural nightmare standing on God's seat. So as he's pouring out this bowl, he's dividing the city, he's dividing and destroying Babylon as it's being raped, and this cup is literally being thrown down upon Pergamos. And he's talking, I went into the letter, so I go through all these different things, and we're going to have a judgment against the Jews first, as we see Joel 1 occur with this locust event, and then Gog coming in and attacking, and so 2/3 are perished between the plagues and Gog, and then that remnant goes away. Well, why in Revelation 11, right after he doesn't sound that seventh trumpet in 10, we start into that prophecy of the nations, and he talks about this judgment that's, now you look at 11. 11's an interesting chapter because he really starts it out with the bringing up of the two witnesses, where the 1260 days occur, and that compels us to abomination. The two witnesses fall, and then we have that shortened period because the witnesses lay in the street for 3.5 days, and then they're resurrected. And God says, don't look back, don't grab anything, head for the mountains, because the story's about over. Okay, so you've got to look at how these things are laid out. But when he goes into this Pergamos thing, he's telling you this for a reason. He's writing this letter to this church to indicate, and if you go to the letter just after that, it tells them not to go to this city. Okay, so even this letter, and I just now thought about that, so if you go into this letter to Pergamos, this letter to Tyrus tells you in basic terms not to really go to this place. It's a terrible place, and that it's going to have a specific judgment against them. So I'm guessing this region or this city next to it's probably going to be affected by this fifth bowl judgment somehow. But it's just a thought that I just came up with. So in Isaiah 21:9, he talks about those chariots coming out as Mystery Babylon is fallen. This is an end day fifth and sixth bowl prophecy. Okay, and this is where a lot of people get this wrong because they compel it into the seals or into tribulation, and that's not right. This is a fifth bowl judgment. This is God's wrath phase. Revelation 18:2 talks about Babylon the Great is fallen again. You go into Isaiah 21, Revelation 18, same verbiage. How this will be uninhabitable. by anything that matters. No one wants to be there. Only devils would want to live there. 18:8 talks about the plagues coming in one day. Okay, 15 days. One day of God is 15 days in our calendar. I broke that down in another video on the timelines. 18:10 is talking about this great city Babylon and how this 1 hour judgment's going to come upon it. How all the merchants are going to mourn over her because, wow, they got rich over her as they raped her. But she's going to be raped at the end, and she won't exist anymore. And how the merchants take her gold and silver and all her valuables, everything away from her. They literally raped this whore that has raped the whole world. And this is her judgment against her. God's going to bring judgment against her, this whore named Pergamos, Satan's bride. So as you get into all this, and I'm not going to go into all this, I've gone into most of this already. You can read this article. I think these connections are extremely important in why Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots, the abomination of the earth, the Jezebel that is going to corrupt everything on this planet, will be the power point, the power center of Satan in end days, his whore, his place of power, where everyone will go through before they go to exalt the beast, will be Pergamos Turkey. God bless everybody.